Well, welcome everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. This is the first time I think we're all officially mic'd up in this room. We have learned that this is a very popular initiative. Positive emotions, negative, everything in between. I think we welcome that from the public and from all of our elected leadership. We're really thankful to have so many of our experts in the room, from law enforcement, all of our city councils, certainly from the faith-based community, nonprofits, and citizen groups. I think it might be appropriate to just go around and do introductions for those that aren't familiar with everyone in the room. And I'll start with the director of our community foundation, Mike Wade.
I just started to talk out loud and I realized with all these mics I probably shouldn't. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Wade, the executive director of the Douglas County Community Foundation.
I'm Tiffany Marcito. I'm supervisor of the Heart Team.
Rand Clark, manager, Department of Community Development, Community Services.
Darren Weekly, Captain, Douglas County Sheriff's Office.
Kevin Duffy, I'm the Law Enforcement Bureau Chief for the Douglas County Sheriff's Office.
Kirk Wilson, Chief of Police in Lone Tree.
Marissa Harmon, Lone Tree City Council.
James Scholes, thank you for the invite. Actually showed up. Local citizen and business owner.
Well, James is being humble, proprietor of Perry's Pizza, and I think we're very one of the owners, and we're very thankful for sharing your experience with us and helping us address this issue.
Dan Marlowe, Executive Director of Help and Hope Center.
Good morning. I'm Erin White, representing Winter Shelter Network in Manor Resource Center.
Good morning. Joshua Rivero, Parker Town Council.
Good morning. My name is Dan McKelkey, and I'm the Director of Human Services for Douglas County.
You're not sure which microphone to use, right? Abe Layden from Douglas County.
Chris Pratt with the Douglas County Attorney's Office.
Jamie Riff, Executive Director of the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative.
Good morning. Wendy Holmes, Communications and Public Affairs Director for Douglas County.
Well, thank you, everybody. Formidable group. Just to give a rundown for everyone listening, both online and in person, we're going to talk about the trespass letter with Chief Wilson and Chief Duffy. We'll have a brief legal update from Chris Pratt. We'll talk a little bit about grant fund applications, and Rand Clark will provide a presentation on that. We'll hear a little bit more around the sign committee and an update there. We do have an update from the amazing Miss Wendy Holmes on the public awareness campaign. We'll also hear an update from the Heart Team, and I know many of us are chomping at the bit to learn more about statistically how they're doing out in the community now that our Heart Team is up and running. We are going to have a brief Heart 24/7 coverage discussion that'll be led by Rand, and then we'll open it up for public comment. But we'll go back to the beginning with the trespass letter, and we'll ask Chief Wilson to kick us off.
Thank you. So the trespass letter is one, it's not specifically for dealing with transients. It's been a tool that law enforcement's used for a long time to partner with business owners and property owners. And when, so if someone is coming back to their property again and again, and they've been asked to leave and they're causing a problem on that property, or another example would be like our street racers who sometimes flood into a property, try to take over the parking lot, and maybe we don't have any reporting party or responsible party for that business on location, and we've already worked with the business owner so they've signed a letter essentially authorizing us to have people get people off their property. And so in Lone Tree, we've done that with about 20 some businesses that have had recurring issues. Pretty common for like Park Meadows Mall. If we arrest someone for shoplifting, they get a trespass notice. They're asked not to come back to the property for over a year. And the same thing can happen at all sorts of other vacant lots and things of that nature where we have maybe recurring camps popping up. And so essentially we have the letter on file, and then if we do contact someone, typically we're not going to make an arrest. We're going to give them a trespass notice notifying them that they're not to come back to the property. And then if we have another contact with them, then we will typically give them a citation for the trespassing and have them move on. So that's essentially how it is used. It's a fairly effective tool. It's not the end-all, be-all of what we have to do, but it's just one more tool that we try to utilize. And it's typically only used when we don't have a property owner or a responsible party there. So if it's during the day and we're at a business where there are responsible people there, we really are going to need to work with the managers to ask people to get off property for whatever reason, whatever problem that is occurring. So that's how the letters are used.
Thank you, Chief.
So for the Douglas Sheriff's Office, since January of 2021 to October 4th of this year, we've received 22 trespass letters from various business owners and such that we keep on file. And like the chief said, it's a very good tool. It's not the end all be all, but it's a tool that really gives the law enforcement officer, the patrol officer, some options that he or she has in front of him. So one of the things that the process in Douglas, our sheriff's office, that I'm looking at kind of upgrading is, you're the business owner, you have I'll use a homeless person who's constantly on your property. We've gone over there. The owner says, I don't want him back anymore. Then we tell him, okay, send us a trespass letter so we can put it on file. And then if we contact him again, we can take action. He sends a letter to us. Dispatch enters it into the system, both at the location and the person. So 10 o'clock at night, heart's not on. That person's contacted by a patrolman for loitering or being a suspicious person or something. It'll automatically pop up. There's a trespass letter, and the officer can take immediate action right there. We have 22 letters on file just in 2021 up to 2022. Interesting enough, since we brought HARD on, we've received 8 trespass letters just in the last couple months from our business owners, because they're really pushing to the business owner saying, hey, this is an option you have. Of those trespass letters, 6 of them are for the same 3 individuals who are constantly moving around the county. So they have trespass letters at like 3 different locations, which helps us a lot. One of the things I got with Denver PD, Denver has a really good online system. So instead of asking the business owner to sit down and type up a letter, the business owner can just go onto our webpage and fill out the trespass request form, and that automatically goes through our records, and it'll speed the process, make it a lot simpler for the business owner or property owner, make it more efficient for us to where we have a record of it. So I just found that last week, so we're working on that right now. But these trespass letters, I think, are going to become very important in the future to help our businesses keep the repeat offenders off their property.
Great. Thank you, Chiefs. And before I open it up for questions on the trespass letter, I know we have some people online from the executive committee. If you wanted to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Kevin Rance, City of Castle Pines City Council.
Thanks for being here.
Karen
Anybody
Johnson,
else?
Town of Castle Rock. Sorry,
Karen.
I'm not sure if yeah, council member, Town of Castle Rock. Thank you.
Anybody
I'm
else?
Travis with the Parker Police Department.
Great. Thanks for being here. Is that everybody online? Okay. Well, and I know that we do have Amy Sherman representing us from an Economic Development Collaborative standpoint, and I think part of the conversation is around there's this great process in place for there to be a trespass letter and the HARD team to be engaged. How does the business community actually learn that they can do this? So maybe others, I see Marissa nodding her head, as a business owner.
And I can share with you that I used it recently and
We have.
a pretty good advocate. Well, after our incident, we learned that from the local Castle Rock Police, and we put that in place. Is this one on? Yeah. Sorry about that. We put that one in place, and immediately after, we had more ability to let the police take action on people that were consistently on the property. Where before they had to say kind of, well, you know, they've been here before, it's okay, but we can't really do anything about it. I think, you know, I had to do some pretty good research even in our company for our restaurants to be able to know who the contact is that the actual landowner is, because it's not just the business owner, it's the landowner, right? So the partner next to us who owns land next to that shopping center also had signed the letter. And Douglas County, to your point, is a little bit more fluid on the website and those kind of things, and he had done those things. And so I think it's about us in the business community knowing about it, first of all. So how we get that out there more, we definitely need to do. And I think that's one of the reasons that I am here today. How can I help communicate that or be able to, again, my perspective is that this isn't a one-part problem, right? There's a transient problem. There's a jail issues that come out after that. There are true homeless, issues and needs that should be dealt with separately. And so I think if we take a different pronged approach, but this one is definitely, I think, important and works right away. Like we noticed it, immediate action, that the managers felt like they had an arm to be protected, had a voice in the matter, and it changed it overnight. So it's a big deal.
I'm a fifth generation Coloradan, and I worked in Denver for a long time. Jimmy, plug your ears on Denver. No, I think it's a positive, and Denver's done some great things. But, I remember working at a large law firm downtown, and, going on 16th Street every block, there would be an issue. There were people literally trespassing, urinating, defecating in front of, businesses. I'm wondering, if I'm like a Home Depot, and there's a corporate policy around trespass letters, how do we get their attention? Can the local managers contact you and get those trespass letters on file? How does that work?
That's the biggest challenge that we've had was the local manager can't make that decision when they're dealing with a corporation. They have to go back to corporate, which is usually not in the state, and get that authorization to give the letter. Once we explain to the manager to communicate that back to corporate, it's been coming through, not as quick as I'd like, but it's coming through. And I think Tiffany can address that a little bit in a while when she's talking. The other thing I want to mention about trespass letters is we've received 3 that we call general trespass. They're not person specific. Stonegate Village Metro District, for example, sent us a trespass letter saying, anyone found on our property that is not authorized to be on the Metro District property, you have our permission to cite him for trespassing. That's a pretty blanket open thing that we can, it gives that patrolman a lot of authority right there because he's working under the direct legal concept from the Metro District there. We have one for no overnight parking, which Rand has discussed that we're seeing more and more of homeless in vehicles that are just parking in public parking spots or in public parking lots where the owner comes in and says, there's no overnight parking allowed on my property. Okay, we can now take action. And then we just have a general trespass letter over on Pyramid Court, same type of thing. Anyone found on this property not authorized is can be cited for trespass. So that goes back to the local manager. We go, is this person authorized to be on your property? No, they're not. Okay, that letter's in effect. Does that make sense?
That makes
And
perfect
we use
sense.
the open one. So the open one helped us. It's a blanket.
The open one, the blanket
Yeah,
helps.
we're not targeting specific people.
Yeah.
We're saying we want the area to be safe and anyone. And that's how Castle Rock's form reads and you can fill out.
Yeah. Well, we're all friends and colleagues here. We do a lot of work on a lot of different boards. And earlier in the week, Amy Sherman represented the Community Foundation. I'm wondering if Mike Wade wants to represent Amy Sherman with the EDC right now.
And I do have a message from Amy that she
Yep.
sent into Luke online that I'm happy to share as well, Commissioner. So
Sure.
So Mike, do you want to go for so Amy just texted into Luke, who's hosting online, recommended that we get the trespass letter to all the chambers of commerces and utilize their connection with the local small business community. And so that was her encouragement, was to utilize our local chambers. So.
Okay, and what's the best, maybe I'll ask our communications director, Wendy Holmes, what's the best way to communicate with our chambers, if that's the direction of this executive committee?
Thank you. Typically, over the last, nearly 20 years, the best way to do outreach with our EDCs and our chambers is directly with their executive directors, and they all have electronic newsletters and mailing lists and other ways that they communicate. So we network directly with the organizations who communicate directly to that target audience. We have a lot of partners that help us do that.
Great. So would that be the direction of this executive committee, to ask maybe our staff to reach out to the chambers with this maybe more specific information on how to sign up with a trespass? Yeah, Marissa.
Okay.
Oh, am I on? Okay.
You are?
I also wanted to add with the trespassing letter, I think it may be good information to add that what to do if to the businesses. So if you have, for property owners as well as the employees that are in the business, if they come across a homeless person, kind of what the protocol looks like, so we make sure that we're all on the same page.
So let me just add a little bit or a little bit of context to how we use the trespass letter. So let's say we look at the an area where that has multiple businesses on it, and you have one property, right? So Cabela's is a good example of that. You have a restaurant, you have a hotel, there's another business coming there, and you have Cabela's, which is the main anchor for that area. And we do occasionally have issues there with people overnight parking. They don't want overnight parking there. But on the other hand, you have a hotel right there, right? So you have all sorts of things that are occurring on that property. And so getting and then who owns the property, right? So I think when we talk about, I think it's going to be a little confusing if we just push something out to businesses and say, okay, well, if you'd like to sign this trespass letter, the reason I'm saying that is because the trespass letter is not valid if it's not from the person who actually physically owns the property. And the folks that have businesses on those property have a pad site, but they don't own the property, right? So how we get out, how we utilize, or how we network with our businesses is, and the way I look at this is just a partnership between us and the business owners, and we want to support our businesses in Lone Tree and in Douglas County, is if we realize there's an issue there, we're going to go and work, we're going to meet with the property owner, find who the property owner is, and then work with them to figure out how they want us to help manage some of the things that are occurring on their property, especially at night when there's no one around. So I would be cautious about just sending it out to Chamber of Commerce without context, because we're going to get a lot of letters that are not meaningful. And even in the way Kevin's describing this, so let's say someone is on the property. You can't just go cite them for trespassing. I mean, you have to contact them and say, hey, do you understand this is private property? People are not allowed here at night. Then we give them a notice to say, listen, you don't come to the property. You can't be on the property. Then if they return, in my opinion, that's when you might cite them at that point. But it's not just a blanket. That's why I said it's not the end all be all of everything we do. We have to be a little cautious about how we use that. And I think we need to be very judicious in how we use it. And I think we need to be fair in how we use it with folks, because they don't always know they can't be somewhere. And so, I think that's the key to all this. And I'd be a little cautious about sending it out to businesses in a blanket way.
I would say if there's a way to get a hold of the property manager, that's really how we got it done. And usually the property managers of those types of establishments, she got it done in 24 hours. So I think that contact's important when you have multiple businesses on a property that they don't own.
One of the tools that in a previous life, when I was the mayor of Parker, one of the issues that we had come up was the change in our code allowing A-frame signs for businesses. Now, the similar situation with this, it wasn't the business owner who could put in for the permit. It had to be the property owner. And the way we handled it, and it actually was a good touch point to be able to get the businesses and the property owners involved. We did proactively reach out to the actual business owners, but led with, this is a tool for you to help you market your business. You need to get your property owner involved, so that it takes less of the onus off of the organization, in this case the county, puts it onto the businesses. And I'll tell you, right off the bat, they were very, very active with the property owners saying, we want this as a tool. And I think the lag time was in minutes before we started having property owners submitting that. So I would fathom a guess that in this scenario, if that outreach was to the businesses, but very, very clear and led with, this is something that comes from your property owner. One other little piece to throw in there, and when it was mentioned about the Stonegate Metro District, I would also fathom a guess that if there was a reach out to some of the HOAs who also have common area property, that they might want to be involved with that as well. I know the HOA where I live in Parker, there are times where people are overnight parking for the same reasons. They might not be aware that this is something they can do in terms of a tool.
That's a good point. So do HOAs need to have a trespass letter too?
So again, I think, there's some fine points in the law in regards to HOAs, right? So you have a gated community, that's private property. If you do not have a gated community, it's still public property. The streets are public. It's maintained by the county or the city that it's located in. So it's not as easy to do that. So there may be another example, like maybe there's a park inside the HOA that is completely maintained by the HOA, which is now private property. But if it's a public park, then it's a public park where anybody can go. And there's just a lot of very nuanced things about where people can be, where they can't be, how trespassing can be utilized, when it can be utilized. And I'm sure the county attorney is well aware of these things, and I know ours is. So there's just a lot of nuances to it as far as how it can be used. And I think it's a tool that is used, but it needs to be used cautiously, and we need to use it fairly, and we need to really be thoughtful about who's signing these letters, how we're going to utilize them, and not go too far with it.
That's great. Yeah, Josh.
I'm just an alternate, but would I suggest maybe the elected go back with their chiefs and their town attorneys and walk through it, and then come back next month prepared to discuss moving forward as a group?
Yeah, well, I think that's the benefit. Let's get a mic for Josh. Josh was, our esteemed councilman from Parker was suggesting that the council members, if you want to reiterate.
Absolutely. My suggestion is the elected officials go back to the respective town attorneys and chiefs of police and discuss any hindrances that may, come up there, or any ideas that may come up there. Appreciate Chief Lone Tree's comments. I'd love to talk to Serapis about it, and just get our own personal opinions and come back here more prepared to come out and attack it together. My one question towards trespass letters and general trespass letters, when you give proxy to a law enforcement, and this is just plain devil's advocate, has there been challenges to said power? Has there been legal challenges by said ACLU or somebody like that? Do we know anything about that? Is it something that they're looking at?
We always get challenges at times in the court system, right? But that's why it's important to, one, make sure you know exactly who has power over that property. And then two, that the person's been given proper notice, right, that they can't be there. And then the third step would be to finally to actually do a trespassing ticket or something like that to cite somebody. So I think as long as you're following the proper steps, there's not a whole lot of argument against it. But I'll give you a great example is the Park Meadows Retail Resort, right? So see how I use retail? Yeah.
Good job. Gold star.
So, that's a quasi-public space, right? But it's also private property owned by businesses, and there's multiple businesses, hundreds of businesses on that property site. And so it's a very complicated place to be working in and around. At night, when there's nobody there, it really is not a public space as much anymore, right? But when it's open, anybody can walk in there. And right, so now a trespass letter really doesn't work. Right now, what you need to do is it's based on behavior and what's occurring on the site. So there are just, I guess my point is that it's very nuanced. I think we do a really good job just working with our businesses when it's appropriate to have a trespass letter on file, when it's not appropriate based on the location. Our Iowa Community Partnership Unit, I know these guys do as well. And that they go and work with the businesses to figure out, okay, who has control of the property? Okay, then there's another property owner we need to contact, and they'll get connected and just work with them to make sure that we're on the same page as far as what we can and what we cannot do. And there's just a lot of nuances to it. So,
well, Chief, you've done a phenomenal job, and I think on behalf of the county, we really want to thank Lone Tree and Councilwoman Harmon for the incredible work you do. You're right at the forefront of all of our county. We always say you're the beautiful welcome sign to Douglas County, and so we know you encounter quite a bit of that. I'm wondering if we are, with caution, able to articulate some of the legal nuance and the issues associated with property ownership, if this executive committee would be interested in communicating with our chambers and alerting them to the fact that they could have this on file. I think point well taken from Josh that it's important that we get, council members get together with their law enforcement. One of the beautiful things about this group is that we do have council members from each municipality here and mostly with their law enforcement. So this is a good place to have that conversation. But is there an appetite from the executive committee to get moving on that? I see Mike Wade shaking his hand. Get moving. I'll entertain a motion.
I would move to move forward with reaching out to the Chambers and Merchants Associations. Second.
So there's a first and second on the floor. Is any further discussion?
I have one comment.
Yeah.
I would just like to encourage us to include information about the HEART team so that resources could be provided to those individuals that would be communicated with, along with the information about the trespass letter.
It's a great comment, Aaron. Would you accept that as a friendly amendment? Absolutely. Okay, great. Any other discussion?
I'll just add this from Amy. Amy mentioned similarly using the Hearts team to reach out to the chambers. Maybe we could put together a presentation, and maybe Hart, from the county's perspective, Hart along with some of our staff that's involved in economic development can sort of press forward on this. So
great. Any other comments? Chairman?
With Chief's additional comments, just making sure that our police department and legal has reviewed before we send out to the businesses, I think would be an important layer to make sure that we're communicating our message effectively.
Absolutely. And I think if I'm understanding your motion correctly, really our county council would have, not to add, Chris has a lot of work on his plate right now. But for our county council to ensure that that legal nuance is addressed appropriately. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, all those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? One. Any abstaining? Okay, and that carries. So I think we have some direction on that. Thanks for that, everybody. So with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is a legal update from Chris Pratt. It's a good segue.
Thank you. Well, obviously, we're all aware of a lot of the legal nuances that permeate through many aspects of this. Today, I was just asked to address one of those. There's been some recent case law addressing local authorities' ability to restrict camping. And in the case, the most recent case, Boulder County, they both restricted camping and they had what they called a blanket ban, which was really an attempt to just direct where people sleep and stay and live, I guess you could say, on public property. And the court was very clear in that case that there are limits to what a local jurisdiction can restrict in these areas of the law. In particular, they said a person has a right to sleep. And so if we are taking away where they are sleeping, we need to ensure that there is somewhere else they can go to sleep, because that is a fundamental right of that person to have somewhere to sleep. And so the way that has kind of morphed is if someone is there voluntarily, we can probably remove them without much legal liability. If someone is there involuntarily, then we may need to have some additional tools at our disposal before we can ask or try to remove them from that location. And this looks like having a place for them to sleep. And there are many ways that can be accomplished, but it is important that there actually be a place for them to go. It is not enough to just have somewhere we can take them and hope that there's room or a bed for them. There has to actually be a bed at that location for us to remove them from the location where they currently are. And so I understand this has been discussed by this group. I apologize, my first time at your meeting. Amy Edwards, who normally handles these for us, she's out of town, so I'll do my best to sub for her in her absence. But I understand that there's been a lot of discussion with some of the entities that have bedding for those who may need a temporary place to sleep. And there is not a lot of room at these locations nearby, and that many of them will not hold a spot for a local jurisdiction to use because they don't have enough beds to hold an empty one for us just in case we need it if there's somebody somewhere where they shouldn't be or where it's not safe for them to be. So just bear in mind, that's my legal update for you, is that if we want to have the ability to enforce local ordinances and regulations that require someone not to sleep in certain places, we need to have somewhere for them to sleep in order for that to be enforceable.
Chris, thank you for that. And just going back to the 4 Cs, we're trying to lead with compassion, code enforcement, community services, and then communications. This group has had a lot of discussion, and we've heard a significant amount from the public around sheltering. Code enforcement is a priority for the community, and what we've heard from legal and law enforcement is you need to have a shelter or a place for people to go to support the code enforcement. So I think the nuanced legal question that this group has of you is, what does that location look like? And one thing we've heard is that there's and maybe Jamie, you know more about this, there's apparently a $55 million campus being proposed by the state legislature to address sheltering in and around the Denver metro region. If that location is not specifically in Douglas County, does that still allow us to have code enforcement?
I don't think there's anything that I could say definitively says we could not ask people to sleep somewhere outside of the county. That is possible. But I would say there has to be a bed there for us. We have to know there's a bed at that location in order to move them or ask them to move to that location. So it's less about where that location is. It's more about that there is definitively a place for them to go. A bed is there. We know a bed is there and waiting.
Okay, so not that, and I know
Ask a
there'll be other
quick
questions.
clarifying question about what you're saying. For one, what's the Boulder County case?
I did not. I
That's
didn't write
we
that down.
find it.
I can send it to you. I don't have it on me right now, but
The second question I have is, what if the person refuses to go to the location that they have the bed? And that's a common thing that we run into where I don't want to go there. They're refusing to go to the location where there's a bed at. So is the case law clear on that nuance of things?
I would say this is what would give you the ability to enforce that they cannot be at the location where they currently are, if there is somewhere else for them to go. The court looked at it as whether it was voluntary or not. If you have a location where they can sleep that is ready for them at that time, then they are voluntarily at this location where they shouldn't be. And so then the court in dicta says that that would probably be okay for us to remove them to that location. But if there's not a bed available, that's when it becomes a problem.
So, Attorney Pratt, we had the HEART team as a part of this reach out to every emergency shelter in the Denver metro area and Colorado Springs. And all but one that is very small that serves women are unable to hold beds. They all are first come, first serve and have limitations of time of day when somebody has to be in line. And based on your position in line, the availability of beds and the need at the time of intake determines whether a bed may or may not be available. And so when we asked the question, would there be a bed available that could be held if we had somebody who was interested in going? And the answer was no. We asked what happened if somebody came at 10 o'clock at night after an intake time frame. They said they would have to stay on the street or find another place and they'd be welcome to get back in line the next day. And so again, I'm not here to interpret whether that would stand, but that is the answer we received from all of the today of all the regional emergency shelters. That may, if that changes in the future, we will certainly take that in consideration. But as of today, that's the status of the emergency shelter system regionally and what the tools are available to the HEART team today to respond to meet that need of identifying and holding a bed.
Yeah. So to get a little bit granular with it, so if there's a regional emergency shelter that the HEART team identifies that maybe cannot reserve specific beds for Douglas County, but does have vacancy or availability, is that sufficient for our code enforcement?
I would say the favorite lawyer answer, that depends. If there is this all comes down to at the moment you need the bed. When law enforcement is asked to actually enforce this on someone, is there a bed available at that time? And it will be available all the way until the person can be relocated to that bed. If the answer is yes to all of those questions, then yes, this probably could be enforced and it could work. I think what we're hearing is that there are no shelters that will guarantee us that availability at this time. And so that makes it problematic for us to try and enforce.
Yeah. Well, and we've heard from law enforcement too. You provided some really good statistics that I'm on a microphone. You guys can't hear me? I'll go a little bit louder. So one of the statistics that, does it matter if I'm closer or not? I think it's just right here on my lapel. Yeah, good try. We'll keep you to law, not IT. So I think an interesting statistic is that we've heard 76% of those leaving the Justice Center are not from Douglas County anyway, and that a large portion of those that are transient tend to be, or at least experiencing homelessness, tend to be transient and not from Douglas County either when law enforcement is encountering them. I know that we want to shoulder our burden for addressing homelessness, and we've had some great input from citizens around the faith-based community stepping into that space, but a systemic issue is outside of families, women and children how do you address single men that have criminal records and other issues associated with, mental health that churches really would not be equipped to immediately address? And so there are some regional solutions, but I think the question is that accessible enough to support our code enforcement, even if it's not in the county? So I think that's perhaps part of the question.
I think the answer to that is the same. It doesn't, I don't think it matters as much whether it's in the county or out of the county. It matters whether we know for sure there is a bed available when needed.
Okay. And maybe I know Tammy's going to update it. Dan, did you have something?
I want to clarify something. I read the Boulder case, and I believe the Boulder case also talked about proximity of the bed and times of day that those beds are open. So I do think that is one nuance that we do have to consider. And Dr. Reif, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do want to ask a question about the 500-bed facility that's being repurposed. I don't believe that's a drop-off shelter. I believe that is a substance abuse and mental health treatment center for people who are experiencing homelessness, who are engaging in treatment in order to move to transitional housing.
And Commissioner Layden, to you, one of the things we've been tracking is our numbers are actually going up. 83% of our inmates coming out of the jail right now that are homeless are not from Douglas County. So we're seeing that starting to rise quite a bit. And going to Chief Wilson's point, and I think our HURT teams will tell you this, many times when they try to find that shelter bed for that person and they're willing to go, the time frame doesn't allow us to get them up there in the appropriate time because the shelter's intake is going to close. But oftentimes, more often than not, the homeless that we're contacting down here came from a shelter, and they refuse to go back to a shelter. They tell us, I'm not going back to a shelter because I'm getting assaulted and I'm getting my property stolen, so they don't want to go to a shelter. So that's a big challenge that the HURT team's dealing with. But our HURT team in the last month has been doing a really remarkable job of finding different beds for different individuals. We took, I think this week alone, 2 down to Colorado Springs. They found some beds down in Colorado Springs. We've taken them up to Denver for shelters up there who had a bed available at the time. HURT takes them up there, gets them checked in. So we're working on it. It's just not something that we can depend on 100%.
Anything else on that? Anything else on legal? What I might want to do is move up in the agenda update from Tiffany on HURT because we're talking about it so much. But let me just ask, are there other questions on the legal update? Tammy?
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right. Thank you for having me here today. So the HURT referral went online for law enforcement and our nonprofit partners on September 14th. From September 14th through September 30th, the number of referrals that we received were 49. 13 were from Castle Rock Police Department, 21 were from the Sheriff's Office, and 2 were from Lone Tree. We had 5 from our nonprofit community partners, and then 8 citizen calls. As a result of those referrals, 22 of those were contacted by HURT. So they're actively enrolled in our case management services. We're referring them to our community partners, trying to find them housing, getting them on lists for stable housing, and so on and so forth. 11 of those referrals were information only. So if law enforcement contacted them and somebody had went to jail, or if they didn't want any services, if they were passing through, those were just information only collected by law enforcement. 15 of those individuals were unable to locate. So if they provided law enforcement with a phone number or email address, we actively tried to reach out to them, received no call back. But they were unable to locate the following day by the HURT navigators. And then we only had 1 that refused to follow up with us after we engaged them and got them into our database. So, that was remarkable that we only had 1 that refused our help immediately. We've seen an increase in usage of the referral online. We have also been reaching out to our community partners, introducing ourselves, telling them about our form, showing them how we use it, and the data that's collected from that. We're also working with our county's IT department to develop a data dashboard so we can communicate with all of you the real-time data that HEART is doing. We also are actively enrolling our clients into the Homeless Management Information System database, HMIS. We are tracking their progress, referring them for services, actively utilizing case management within that database. We're also working with the data administrators within HMIS to receive regular reports on service and outcomes of the services that we provide. I also wanted to highlight a little success story that we've had over the last couple weeks. Our navigator, Greg Matthews, who's here in the crowd, he recently received a referral and assisted a 73-year-old woman who had been found living in her vehicle. She had been living in her vehicle since December of 21, in and out of her vehicle. Greg immediately began working at finding this woman housing. The woman was able to secure housing inside of another home, but that room wouldn't be ready until November of 2022. However, she needed living arrangements to bridge that gap until she moved in November. Within 2 days of Greg consistently reaching out to community partners, one of those agencies was able to secure a hotel room for her and pay for 7 days. Greg knew that temporary stay at the hotel would be short, so he was reaching out to other agencies outside of Douglas County that specifically tailored to elderly individuals. That shelter was sympathetic to the woman's needs, immediately sent Greg an application. Greg went up to the hotel, had the lady sign the application, helped her fill it out, and submitted it to the shelter for the woman. The woman was accepted into the shelter, and the director at the shelter stated that if there were no beds available, that a respite home would be secure for this woman. The hotel stay ended, and the woman was transitioned into the shelter and temporarily until her home was available in November. So we thought that was, a very successful outcome for HEART, and the persistence that Greg did to reach out to our community partners, both inside Douglas County and outside. It's very rewarding, and we are very busy and trying to do the best that we can with tapping into services even outside of Douglas County. I'm going to pass it on to Rand.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask Luke to share. So one of the things that Tiffany mentioned that we're pulling a lot of our data from is from our referral forms. And so we have multiple forms. We've talked about them in the past, available to law enforcement, to our community partners. And we are excited today to let you all know in our community that we now have a referral form live and ready and available to the public. And so if you go to the Douglas County website and you search for HEART, you'll find information about our HEART on our website. And now, as of today, if you click right here on this click here, it will pop up just a really brief small form where we just need your name and phone number, your contact information, so we can contact you back, a date, and then just sort of a where we should be looking and a reason so that the HEART team can follow up. And so we had this form live for 2 weeks and had almost 50. Tiffany and the HEART team have been going. You guys are briefings at Castle Rock Police. They've been at Sheriff's Office, been a Lone Tree. They're in with our law enforcement now, training them how to use that form, getting the shortcuts on their phones. So we're making that form as accessible as possible so that we can improve our ability to communicate the needs and get our team out there and hopefully see more success, whether it's helping people navigate to resources, find housing, getting them to appropriate shelter if they're willing to engage. And we're excited about that. Also happy to report that we have our final team member joining us in less than 2 weeks. So we have our third team member who's moving into town next week and will be on the job shortly thereafter and trained. So very grateful, super excited for the impact they're having and the work that they're doing out in the field. And of course, to our law enforcement partners for their partnership in helping us engage, keeping us safe, but also connecting us to the right folks who need that help. So.
Wow. Well, on behalf of the county, and maybe I'll just take my county hat off as a father of three that just lives in this community. Thank you so much. This is a really significant and successful program, and we know that what you do is hard. These engagements are really difficult sometimes, and we are so thankful you have the experience, the expertise, the background, and the compassion to engage in a way that really addresses the issue. I'll just say I have noticed as a citizen that something's different. I mean, I sense, and maybe it's just a perspective, but it seems like a lot of people are being connected with, and I'm seeing less of that struggle just out on the street. And we know that's a safety issue. We don't want babies in medians. We don't want people on really fast corners anyway, because that's a safety issue. But huge hats off to the HEART team and the amazing coordination with law enforcement. It's not possible without you guys. So thank you for what you're doing. I think it's wonderful. There's a number for citizens that are here that is live and accessible right now. We'll make sure you all get that phone number. I know we're going to talk about the public information campaign associated with that, so more people are aware of it, but thank you. Any questions or comments for our HEART team? Wow, well, thank you very much. Part of that is a discussion around the 24/7 potential coverage. And I know that we heard from Chief Wilson and others that wonderful program during the day, but what happens if it's 10 at night and the increased burden on law enforcement? What does this look like? Is there an expectation that maybe there's more of that navigation team? I really want to acknowledge Laura Cinconi and our mental health initiative. You should probably be at this table up here because this co-responder team model, having a navigator paired with law enforcement, is something that our mental health initiative has done really successfully. So we are just piggybacking on all of your great work. So thank you for inspiring us here. But 24/7 coverage, did either of you want to talk about that?
Well, I think as we continue to look at what the HEART team is able to do, I think it's certainly something that bears conversation on how do we utilize that resource most effectively. Most efficiently in our community to contact folks. And I know Chief has looked at some data around like when are those calls coming in, when are the hot times to get calls or to get referrals. I think that we have some models out there. We've also reached out to some of our counterparts in other communities to see what they're doing in terms of increased coverage. There is certainly opportunity. There are certainly concerns about what that looks like in the middle of the night. We do get calls, so how do we help connect people more efficiently, but also what do you do at 2 a.m. When a nonprofit, I don't think Dan Marlowe is going to appreciate a call at 2 a.m. about can you help? And so I think there's a lot of things to consider. As staff's perspective, I think we would encourage us to continue to look at the data around when those referrals are coming in, when those calls are coming in, and to figure out what the best impact is going to be. But it's certainly something we can consider and something that we want to understand how to best utilize it, because we do believe that there's a lot of success in this program. And I think there's a lot of different ways to approach it given those varying dynamics and things that we can look at. So I don't know, Chief, do you want to jump in there?
Just to give everybody an idea, I ran the numbers for just the month of September for the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. We had our highest contact numbers to date in the last 2 years. Just this last month, we contacted 69 homeless individuals. We completed 60 reports. Of those 60 reports, 43% of those reports were done by the HEART team. 57% of those reports were done by just the patrol officer on the street. But when you break it down to the times during the day, 7 of them were done on late swing shift hours when the HEART team had gone home. 2 of them were done when swings and graves are overlapped. That's between 9 and midnight. And 7 of them were done on the graveyards team after midnight. So 16 of our 60 reports were done after hours, so 27% of our reports. The majority of our contacts that are being made are very early in the morning, between 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning, because that's where we're finding them, that they bedded down and they're getting reported. I had a lieutenant kind of make a joke with me the other day. He goes, at 5 o'clock in the morning, they're homeless. At 6 o'clock in the morning, they're unemployed. That's kind of because they're used to that time frame of being on the street, that if you contact them at 5 o'clock in the morning, sleeping in the stairwell, they're homeless, and they can't deny they're homeless. But they know they get up and start moving, then it's harder to classify them as homeless, if that makes any sense. But we are seeing not a great majority of our calls after hours, but we are seeing about 27% of our reports taken last month were taken when HART was not available.
It's an incredible statistic. Thank you for all of that work. Questions?
I have more of a
Yeah, yeah.
Also, as someone who has to run a 24/7 shop, child protection has to respond 24/7, 7 days a week too. We do have a person that is on to respond to emergencies from 5 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock in the morning, and then the rest of the folks take that call from them if it continues. What we get in the middle of the night is generally the worst of what we see. We don't generally get the more mundane calls. So I would imagine for law enforcement to be something similar, that what you get in the night would be something more difficult. And I would imagine your resources are not the same. So I think we also would have to think about what would be the cover for the HART team in the middle of the night. So when we're considering when we deploy this resource, we have to make sure that they're safe as well.
That's a good point.
Well, the other thing we've talked a little bit about it is I'm not quite sure what the HART team can do at 2 o'clock in the morning, because everything's closed. The shelters are closed. The resources that they normally would reach out to are closed. So I have to look at it from a perspective as patrolman goes out, finds somebody in a park, he's homeless. So, okay, we're going to call the HART team. That patrolman's going to have to stay there until the HART team, if they're on call, drives to that location. That could take up to about an hour. And then I don't know really what the HART team can do at 2 o'clock in the morning, because we don't have some of the resources that maybe we could talk about later of, temporary hotel vouchers, that kind of stuff, to get them out of that park or off the street, to a safer location. But right now, I think the HART team would be a little bit, there'd be a little bit of a difficulty finding resources after hours.
Yeah. Tammy, I wonder, do you have any insights in terms of navigation, what that would look like after hours?
Yeah, I think, right now we have a lot of success because our community partners are open. If we need an emergency food box, we can go to Cherry Hills and they can put one together for us. But if it is 2 a.m., those community partners are not open. So it would be difficult to navigate in the middle of the night. There are more safety concerns, being out there in the dark, even when we're with law enforcement. I think that we're more successful during the early morning and day. We just have more ability to connect them with, services even within Douglas County and outside. And I just don't know what that would look like at 2 a.m.
Yeah. Well, I think your safety is of paramount importance to us. And I think that's the beauty of the navigation dyad, is having law enforcement paired with a clinician or a navigator, so that you're not unsafe. I think the flip side is Patrol does such a wonderful job, and they're really compassionate. Our citizens, I think, know how phenomenal law enforcement is. But, in terms of training on the just pure social services navigation side, it's nice to have somebody with your background paired with law enforcement to help with that, even though law enforcement does that all the time. So I think part of the systemic issue is, here we are putting out a phone number right to the community. And I think Chief Wilson raised this a while ago. What happens if people see that number and they want to call at 2 in the morning? And we heard from Lone Tree, I think it was Mayor Millay, that talked a lot about the RTD station, end of the line. I don't know what time that end of the line stops, but it's late. And so if you have people experiencing homelessness that are gathered in that RTD station, citizens are there, they want to call the HART team, who's picking up that call?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we have to consider is, and I'll use the RTD as an example, train ends at midnight. I don't know exactly that's the right time, but there is, shy of another resource that we develop in our community, there's nothing to navigate them towards at midnight. We did not find a shelter that would allow even law enforcement to drop somebody off at that time of night up in Denver. And so most of them have hours where if you're not there by 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 7 p.m., whatever that local rule is, they cannot accept you. And so that's one of the biggest challenges is, yes, we could have somebody come. Their answer would be, let me get your information so I can follow back up with you tomorrow once the resources and partners. So I think we can certainly look at how we address that particular circumstance, but we also have to understand what are we navigating them towards at that point and at that time of day. Even with RTD, it becomes very challenging. I did talk to some contacts. I did talk to our counterparts in Adams County who have a more robust homeless outreach team than we do. They have a fairly decent sized staff of navigators. I mean, they started down the road of 24/7 coverage and pulled back because they found that in those after hours, what we'll call after hours sort of time frame, there wasn't much other than getting somebody's information that they could really do. Because sooner or later, everybody else is going home and going to bed as well. And so you contacted one shelter and you asked the question, I think, Tiffany asked them, like, would you take somebody at 10 o'clock if law enforcement? Like, unfortunately, no, they have to spend the night outside and they're welcome to line back up tomorrow morning and to get shelter. And so we have to sort of understand that what's the outcome of that call. And so it would be my encouragement that we look over the course of the next month or so and continue to look at the data and make data-driven decisions around when those calls are coming in, how many of them we're able to contact, and how many of them are we really missing, and allow us maybe a little bit of time as we get our third navigator, as we get more data coming in, as we're tracking that now through our various referral forms, and really look at the data and help the data make us decisions on what the wise way to expand the team is to become to continue to be more effective. I think that's what I would recommend is let's let the data drive us a little bit, but also learn from others.
Yeah. What are the current hours?
Essentially Monday through Friday. It depends a little bit on the day, but essentially 7 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. we have somebody that's available. Some mornings they start as early as 6. They're typically out till 5. We're still waiting for number 3 to get here, and so hours will be a little, basically 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. is our anticipated availability once we get all 3 on the ground, Monday through Friday.
And what is that costing taxpayers? So we have a navigator with a vehicle. What does that look like for each HART member?
Initial investment or ongoing?
Both.
So the initial investment, I apologize, I don't have the exact number right off the top of my head, but I believe the initial ask for the team to stand them up and to pay for salaries for a year and to make the initial investment in vehicles was around $200,000, just shy of $200,000 per navigator. That includes the cost of the vehicles, uniforms, salaries, bikes, the technology that they need, everything else. On an ongoing basis, I believe I was working the other day, it's right around $150,000 a year ongoing to pay for salary benefits, vehicle maintenance, ongoing technology services, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Per navigator.
Average. Well, the good news is this county's out of debt. We have a balanced budget, so, no increase in taxes to pay for that. And we've used ARPA funds, which are federal government, American Rescue Plan Act funds for this pilot project. I know in the mental health space, what we've learned is that it's actually a savings for law enforcement, hospital emergency rooms, for our DA's budget, when, people aren't necessarily criminalized, booked, and have to go through the justice system. They're just contacted and helped with services. And I wonder if just a point of contact, even though we know resources are limited at 2 a.m., does it help to just know that citizens can call somebody and that a navigator with compassion can go out and contact them? Is that helpful? I'll ask you, Tammy. And maybe it's not. I'm asking the question.
I'm not sure about that. However, I know that I have not received any calls after 5:30 since our phone number has gone live. And I keep my phone on 24/7. Just in case Rand needs to get a hold of me. No, just kidding. But yeah, I have not received any calls from any citizens after 5:30. And The earliest that I've received a call from a citizen was maybe 10 a.m.
Oh,
Most of the calls that we're getting, the referrals that we're getting right now are from law enforcement. I imagine that will increase once the community has access to our referral form online. And, more people are, knowing of our program and, how to reach us. But yeah, I have not received a call in the middle of the night as of yet.
well, that's a great statistic. Yeah.
And of the 16 calls that we received last month that were after hours or after Hart was done working that day, almost all of those came in through the non-emergency line. Like I've said before, we're either getting called for a suspicious person, a welfare check, something of that nature. So the person sees someone laying on the side of the road at 10 o'clock at night, they're going to call either 911 or they're going to call the non-emergency line for a welfare check, and then patrol will go out there. We make that contact, and it all goes back to the contact. Then we do the homeless report. With every homeless report comes a Hart referral. So that contact we made with that person at 10 o'clock with all that person's information is given to Hart, and then they come in, like our Hart team comes in. Tammy starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's the first thing she does is she goes and finds that person.
After you've made contact overnight. Yeah, who else? Anybody? Well, I think about our mental health initiative, and I know we've added our youth co-responder teams. My understanding is that they are 24/7. So if you have somebody with suicidal ideation at 3 in the morning and it's a fourth grader, right? Is that, or is it just limited by a certain number of hours?
They are not 24/7. I think it depends on the team. I think they're expanding their hours. Laura's here, but I think they go maybe till 8 o'clock in the evening, depending, and they stagger their starts, but they are not 24/7. Because if there's an emergency, you're still going to call the police.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're not 24/7, but with 6 teams out there between the 4 jurisdictions, and they all take care of each other, we've got a pretty broad spectrum of time. We did a very deep dive study on the hotspot times and look of when these calls come in. So that's when everybody's putting their teams on the street when the highest volume of calls is normally coming in for a mental health crisis call, and it's working.
Yeah. So the staff recommendation is maybe save some money, pause, let some data continue to come in. Does the board feel pretty comfortable with that at this time? Seeing a lot of nodding heads. So we'll continue to watch.
And we do plan to continue to bring these reports to this group on a monthly basis, and expand what data we can bring. So again, please recognize to the executive board, we have 2 weeks worth of data. And so, because we just launched the form in the middle of September. And so we know that over the course of the next few months, we will have more and more data. We'll have more ability to report and capture and share that with you. And so I think we're also heading towards winter. And I think things will change here we don't know exactly what that looks like. But I think over the course of the next 6 weeks, we might get snow. And that certainly then starts to change the dynamic of the solution. So I think allow us a little bit of time to really be driven by what the numbers tell us, I think is the wise and prudent move.
Okay, save some money. Anybody else? Let's jump back up and thank you for all your success. I mean, that's really wonderful update. So let's jump back up to sign committee update and maybe the public awareness campaign. And I know Jen is out. Is somebody else doing
Jen is online.
Oh, Jen's up online. Okay. Hi, Jen.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay. How are you doing?
Hanging in there. So a sign committee update for you all. Luke, if you could go to the next slide and show this is our final sign design after working through with the committee that has multiple municipality representatives as well as other community members helping us work through this issue. We are also at this point working with our Douglas County Public Works to manufacture signs. We'll be doing that at Douglas County's expense, and we'll provide those for the municipalities or other partners for installation and maintenance to be done kind of on their end. We have we're working through ordering 3 different signs, sizes. One is a 12 by 8. That's essentially a no parking size sign that has already been ordered. And we are working through a medium size sign. So that would be the small sign, the no parking size. We're working through a medium size sign and a larger sign that would be able to be put on intersections, that sort of thing. We needed to do some redesign on the medium and large signs. So again, a big thank you to the town of Castle Rock's design team for helping us rework those signs so that we would be able to make those large enough and not impede any of the writing or anything on those. So that is all in the works. Wanted to let you all know that. In addition to that, we have been working through with each of the municipalities, going through their approval process. So just to let you know, Douglas County Board of County Commissioners has approved the signs for installation at this point. The town of Castle Rock is receiving an update from their assistant town manager next week. That's planned for next week at the town council meeting. The town of Parker reviewed the signs from their staff, providing an update last week, and they did provide us some update, some information and input as far as their impression of the signs and whether or not they would be able to use them. In addition to that, we're working with the city of Lone Tree to work on putting a presentation together and go through the same approval process. So we're in the process of connecting with staff there. In addition to that, this committee has talked, in addition to talking with the municipalities and our county staff, and identifying locations where there are hot spots of panhandling activity happening in each of the municipalities. Those locations will be presented to each of the town councils for their consideration as far as whether or not they would like to include signs at those locations. But in addition to that, I believe we had additional input to look for high traffic areas where the signs could be included that would help kind of promote the public awareness campaign. So staff has been working on exploring that aspect. At this point, we have gotten very positive feedback from our county regional parks and trailheads to install those in those facilities. In addition, we've reached out to Highlands Ranch Metro District to initiate a conversation about having the signs located at some of their regional parks, including Civic Green Park and Highlands Ranch. And we have extended an invitation to the library, the Douglas County Libraries, to ask if we would be able to put signs at their locations as well. So that conversation has been initiated. We also, in talking with municipalities, heard that several of the municipalities are having panhandling activity that's happening at private locations. So at Targets, at Walmarts, at King Soopers. And there was a suggestion made during the sign committee that as a group, Douglas County reach out to those corporate offices. So say reach out to King Soopers or Walmart and ask them if they would be willing to locate these signs at their locations in Douglas County. So actually, I'm happy to see that Amy Sherman is on board or is online and would love to talk with her more about this. I know we are going to need some inroads as far as how to connect with those corporate offices and what's kind of the best way to go about that. But we're happy to spearhead that and help with that, as I know some of the municipalities are interested in having those at those private locations. So that is where that is. And then I also wanted to give you an additional update that we have had, excuse me, a conversation with CDOT staff. And they have agreed, because of their regulations, they cannot allow the sign as we have it to be located in their right of way. But they have agreed to include no trespass signs in 16 priority locations that were essentially identified to us when we were working with law enforcement to identify where the top kind of panhandling activity is happening. So we have passed along that list to CDOT. Now they also need to go through their approval process before they can install those signs, but they would be willing, as far as the last conversation we had, to install no trespassing signs. And that'll be a black lettering on white background type of sign that we've all seen. So that's kind of where that's at in the process, and we'll continue to stay connected with them as they work through their process. That's all I have. Happy to
Jen,
answer
thank
any
you so much for that. Yeah, I just wanted to thank the sign committee for the 7 months of meetings, all of the municipalities and their representatives for the hard work of connecting within their offices around the approval process. I also want to recognize Mike Wade and the Community Foundation. That DouglasHasHeart.org goes to a link that provides more information about our initiative, which I know Wendy Holmes will go into a little bit deeper depth on. But it really gives citizens an opportunity to donate directly to a trusted resource, the Douglas County Community Foundation. I don't know, Mike, if you wanted to share any more on that.
Absolutely. The process that will happen is that anyone who's wanting to be philanthropic with their donation instead of handing that cash out has the opportunity to come find out more information at DouglasHasHeart.org, but then make a donation, a gift to a specifically dedicated fund that 100% of those funds will be utilized with homeless organizations in Douglas County to help boots on the ground with those issues. So the Community Foundation is poised and ready to go to turn that on as soon as everything is ready on the county's end and content is available for it. And the fund is already set up on our end in place, and the mechanism can be turned on within an hour.
Wow. Community Foundation, the Red Cross of Douglas County. Any questions for Jen on the sign campaign or on the signage? Josh, did you have anything from Parker you wanted to share?
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you to the executive team. Parker did review on Monday night the sign, and we had a lively discussion amongst council. There were a couple things presented by our staff that held us from making the decision to go ahead. The first was we had a hard time with the locations. We don't have a consistent panhandling, and I say consistent panhandling problem on public properties. And with that said, we do have 83 that runs through the middle of town. That's our biggest intersections, and that's where we find the people. And as was stated earlier by Jen, CDOT had no desire to put signs up on 83, so we're looking at no trespassing signs there. The exits for E470, same situation. Parker always consistently tries and doesn't try. We do follow the MUTCD, and with that, because of CDOT running through the midst of town, we have to continue that message throughout our right-of-ways. So our public right-of-ways, we try to maintain the same communication level as we have on 83. And then lastly, and this is where we kind of are willing, we're definitely still open. We have no private property owners that have approached us for a true trespass letter or general trespass letter yet. Obviously, that's an ongoing effort. We do have panhandlers on consistent private properties, but when those private properties are approached, as was just stated earlier, the corporate gets involved and they don't want to go that route yet. We have talked about opening up the sign to public or to private companies and saying this sign is available for you if you would like to put it on your property, going forward that way. But as far as public rights of way, the town could not see any locations that we would find it beneficial at this time.
Great. Well, thank you to Josh and all the municipalities for, exploring this within each of your jurisdictions. We always believe that local control is best, and we want to just be a resource. Douglas County has approved the signs and is producing them at our expense, and they are available to all the municipalities. Any other input on the signs from anybody? Okay. Ms. Wendy Holmes on the campaign.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. Luke, if you don't mind, this would be a good time to pull up the Douglas Has Heart page. Thank you so much. And thanks, Jen, for the update on the signs. I think everyone in this room knows that before the signage is live in any of the locations that have been chosen by folks in this room, before that signage is up, this communications campaign will launch. And the intent of it is to call attention to the forthcoming signage, sort of a watch for these signs message featuring an image of these signs. Now, the campaign focuses on educating and informing. It's really at a very high level, it's a behavior change campaign. This campaign is intended to inform residents and our business community. So we always say, who's the target audience for this message? It's really two audiences, our residents and our business community, similar messages and different messages, and I'll get into that right now, hoping that we get them to respond in very specific ways when they encounter the unsheltered in our communities. The focus is on compassionate, safe, effective ways of making a positive difference by redirecting generosity and connecting those in need to meaningful resources. Very high level communications objectives. So just to get into a little bit more detail, if I can get my laptop to respond. So our goal is to build community awareness that the solution to managing the presence of the unsheltered and at risk in our communities is a shared countywide responsibility. I've said this before in this room, in this meeting, if we are not all committed to this, it will not work. It's not one community's responsibility, challenge, it's our entire challenge, and it's a shared responsibility among those of us in the room, among our residents, and among our business community. So with that in mind, what we're trying to do is build awareness and trust in other solutions to fulfill the very generous citizens we have in this community, to fulfill their need to be loving and giving and to help those who appear to be suffering. We know that that's who we are in this county. And if we are saying handouts don't help, so what else can we do? We're going to show you what to do. And our also goal, if I may, at a very, very, very high level is to change the reputation of the county as being a lucrative place to panhandle. Okay. And as we always like to do in my business, we like to measurably change and be able to measurably redirect that generosity. And as Mr. Wade said, with this campaign, we think we'll be able to do that. So who are we trying to reach? What are we trying to convey? What are the objectives of this campaign? We're trying to recognize and redirect generosity regarding the actions that will make the biggest difference as we compassionately respond to the unsheltered in our community. For our business community, the outreach will be, as we discussed a little bit earlier, it's interesting that I came to the meeting with this all laid out and I've already heard all about it. So I'm glad I'm on track. With the business community, our outreach will be directly via our chambers and our EDCs and all of the other business entities that we have in this county, many of which I've not mentioned, to inform them how to, number one, should they be inclined, how to provide financial support to the unhoused, how to access services for the unhoused they encounter on their property by providing information about HEART. Obtain the same signs for their private property if they choose to. So we need to tell them in this campaign, here's how to get a sign, reach out to this person at the county. And also, we want to empower local law enforcement to act on their behalf when there is a need to enforce trespassing on the property. So we need to help them know how to get that no trespassing letter. And Melissa, as you mentioned, I think a set of FAQs is going to be really important as part of this campaign. What do I do if? So the call to action here, as you can see on the sign, here we come. The call to action features this marketing URL, DouglasHasHeart.org. It goes to this page. And Luke, if you can scroll down a little bit. So you can see the donate button at the top, but here are the organizations that their generous donations will support. The Family Tree, our Winter Shelter Network, Help and Hope, Douglas County Housing Authority, and the Douglas County Homeless Initiative. We've got the information on this page so that folks can see that if they do make a donation, this is really going to make a difference with existing organizations that are already doing the work, tailoring solutions to those who are in need that are encountered in our communities. Now, the donate button at the top will go to a page at the Douglas County Community Foundation where they'll be able to do that. The second call to action is that phone number that will help connect the caller to the Homeless Engagement Assistance and Resource Team, our HEART, who will respond to the homeless they encounter in our community. Now, how will we reach all these people? I need to just quickly share, and Commissioner Layden probably knows what I'm going to do here, but even with the assets the county has, this is still not enough. We have nearly 190,000 people on Nextdoor that we can reach, okay? Almost 14,000 on Twitter, almost 19,000 on Facebook. We have almost 1,200 subscribed to our YouTube channel. We have 1,500 followers on our Instagram. We have 4,800 on LinkedIn. Who knows, maybe people who are looking for a job will want to help. We have email subscribers that are almost 15,000, and we have a special free subscription button on our website right now for the Homeless Initiative. So if you want to know what's going on with the Homeless Initiative, go there, sign up. It's free, and whenever we push out news, you will get it first directly. In addition to that, we have our live town halls that many of you have seen. We have digital ads on all 6 of the web pages for all of the Douglas County community newspapers. We're working with media directly throughout the entire region. But this still isn't enough. This still is not enough. For this to be successful, we are going to need the communications professionals in our law enforcement teams, in our municipalities, in our business community throughout this county to help get the word out. We'll do all the work. We'll do newsletter copy for you. We'll do social media copy for you. We will write the news releases. We will do it. We will give it to you to use. I am going to, Commissioner doesn't know this yet, but I'm going to convene the Douglas County Communicators Task Force for a meeting just to talk about this campaign.
Thank you.
That's everybody, including our hospitals, law enforcement, et cetera, just to focus on this campaign. It will not be successful without a full court press. And I will do my best to answer any questions anybody may have at this time.
Well, let me just say, we are really blessed and thankful to have Wendy Holmes at the county. So many of you have had a lot of interactions with her, and her ability to communicate out to our citizens. I mean, that 190,000 number is no joke. And she does incredible work for us. We're really thankful for you. Yes, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I just want to parlay with you as far as the trespass goes, is we as a community need to let our corporate businesses know, though the commercial areas, they're many miles away. There are people that don't live here making decisions for us, and we live and shop at those stores. Managers' hands probably are hamstrung and they can't do anything. But if we let this corporate stores know that we're actively as a community And if people and your electeds trying to do something, we got a great sheriff's department and local police that want to do something. We're hamstrung by certain case laws, et cetera. We need to communicate that to our stores. So let's tell them as a community to have them help us and comply with our wishes to have that done, and let them know that, you know, we want to continue to shop those places, but we don't want to be accosted by over aggressive panhandling and homelessness in those private and public areas around there. So that's something we could do as everyday person, community members going out there when you shop, support the managers, but contact corporate. Thank you.
That's a great comment, Tim. Thank you for that.
And one more
Anybody
thing,
else? Yeah,
Commissioner,
please.
this page that you're looking at is password protected. It is not live. Mike and Terry and I are going to be meeting, I think, Friday to wrap this up in a nice bow so that we can make this page live with them.
Great. Thank you so much, Wendy. Yes. Anybody else on the campaign? Well, I know Rand had a brief comment on grant fund applications, and part of that is getting grant funding so that we're saving taxpayers even more money and getting grants to support this. I don't know if you want to give a brief 30 seconds, and then we'll get to public comment.
I'll just say simply that we have applied for 5. And so we're in process with 5 different applications. We are anticipating a state call for project for state funding in November, and we're monitoring all of those opportunities. So we'll leave it at that at the high level. Just that we've applied and we're still in there. There's a time lag.
Thank you for that, Rand. We appreciate it. So just want to make sure that we give citizens an opportunity to comment. And I know we're close on time, but I'm going to just stick around until we're done.
Dan, we can use this this public podium right here, and they can use that way. The cameras and all the AV tech are set for that.
So the first person who signed up for public comment was Henry Moss. Is it Henry Moss here? Hi, Henry.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Good morning, I should still say. My name is Henry Moss. I come to you today as a concerned public citizen who recently relocated from Douglas County, Nebraska to Douglas County, Colorado. My family and I are located here. We live in Meadow South, and our property is adjacent to the Rock Church where the proposed encampment or shelter site is being considered. And I would just want to bring to your attention that we have 7 grandchildren, 3 of which are on the spectrum, and even given our best efforts, sometimes are put themselves in vulnerable positions. But as a whole, as a community, I would echo that all the vulnerabilities that were just spoken of here for trained caregivers when dealing with this population, this at-risk population, is multiplied when they're encountered by citizens who don't have that training, who can't perceive and analyze and formulate strategies when encountering potential threats, right? And so the response times of law enforcement are limited. They are the backup, the fall guys for those emergent situations. And in the dark of night in our communities, we can't expect them to respond to that area, an area where there are no wraparound services to support this at-risk population that are immediately accessible. And I understand our faith-based community. I'm a man of faith myself. I have over 40 years of public service, local, state, and now federal. And so I understand sustainability. And I don't know how this system will be sustained over time based on grant funding, which is limited, based on taxpayer dollars, which we need to be frugal with, and Douglas County does a great job. So if we're going to place our most vulnerable at risk without training and adequate awareness of potential problems, what we will end up with is more cruiser therapy, right? Overpopulated mental health facilities, and our jail system. So I would also ask that this board consider revisiting the HOA component of the trespass letter, do a little bit more research for the non-gated HOA communities and see what the possibilities there are for those maintained lands, right? And then also to just understand that I understand the need to help from a faith-based perspective. And one thing that the faith-based community has more than anything are people, resources, right? There are ample opportunities to support this initiative without putting encampments in communities and neighborhoods that could potentially affect children. Logistics is an issue. We just talked about that. And then, volunteering. If they receive training and they want to volunteer to help the Heart organization or other organizations, start their own organization. To me, those are better, more safer alternatives than to implant even the slightest risk of danger to families and children. I am in the community. I'm here to help. And you'll probably see my face. I've been asked to look and see what volunteer work I can do. And I plan to do that. So again, 40 years of public service. I'm a combat veteran. And so my heart is in the right place, as my faith-based brothers and sisters are. And I just want us to be good neighbors of each other and consider the care of the whole community while we address this great need. So thank you for your time.
Henry, thank you very much. I can tell you're a public servant at heart, so I hope you do continue to stay engaged with us.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. That was the only person who signed up, but let me open it. Ben Ling, come on up.
And Commissioner, as of this time, Luke indicates there's no hands raised online, but we'll continue to keep you posted on that as well.
None online.
None online at this time.
Okay, Mr. Ling.
Hey guys, Benjamin Ling. I'd like to use the public comment time to discourage for the Board of County Commissioners and other decision makers in our county from allocating public resources for things that would create an environment conducive to attracting the homeless population to Douglas County. I used to live in Denver, and over the past couple of years, I've also been selling some of our properties in Denver because I'm seeing firsthand the damage that's being caused. For example, one of the properties that I sold was a condo in a larger building. The last HOA meeting that we were at, they had to put to vote the proposition, shall we erect one of those big orange plastic construction barriers around the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street? Because if someone comes and pitches a tent there, it will take weeks or maybe months for the police to get these people out. Denver has become a magnet for homelessness, and it's not just downtown, it's emanated to Colorado Boulevard and all over Denver. We cannot have this in Douglas County. People move in Douglas County to escape these situations. Additionally, I would encourage all the people who are decision makers in this process to avoid using the language of the left. And what I mean by that is words such as camping ban, urban camping, or other derivatives of the word camping. I've been camping before, and what these people are doing is certainly not camping. They're setting up residents in areas that are not zoned for people to live in, period, end of story. When I'm on a long run on a Saturday morning on the East Plum Creek Trail, and I encounter some guy doing personal hygiene underneath the Plum Creek Road Bridge at 7:45 a.m., which happened the Saturday before last, that guy's not camping, okay? A few weeks prior to that, my wife took the children and another kid from the neighborhood to the East Plum Creek Trail. While I was doing a run, they were walking. They found 2 sleeping sites in just the mile and a half or so they covered on that trail. This is the wrong answer. Douglas County's moving the wrong direction. Any resources that are being directed towards creating a conducive environment for homelessness in Douglas County are being misdirected, and I would firmly urge everyone to be working in the opposite direction of that. Thanks, guys.
Ben, thank you for joining us. I'm glad I'm not sure if you were here for the whole meeting, but part of what we've done in Douglas County is we've signed the pledge to get to functional zero. So we're here not to proliferate homelessness, but to reduce it to zero. We had a really phenomenal report from our HEART team, which is the Homeless Engagement Assistance Resource Team, that has already made a series of significant contacts to address just that. So I'll make sure that you have that phone number. But again, part of what we're doing is ensuring that Douglas County stays safe, clean, and protected for all citizens. I will say that we do have a camping ban, and unfortunately, I know you don't like that language, but we do not allow any camping in our public properties, and Chris Pratt's predecessor has made it clear that based upon our signage, we can do that. We also have some really active and engaged cleanup crews that can immediately go to an abandoned encampment and clean that up, store private property, and ensure that that area is clean. So I hope you do continue to use that resource. Yes, ma'am. Do you want to come up?
My name is Susan Adams, and I'm a single mom and a widow, and I have resided in Douglas County for about 2.5 years. 6 months of that, I was on the street with my daughter. It was right about the time they increased all of our rent. I no longer made enough money for our rent. I lived at Marquis at Castle Pines Apartments, and we decided to try to figure out another way, and it failed. It fell through. Because of the requirements for people like me who don't have an education and don't have access to good paying jobs, because here in Colorado, there's not enough pay for us to sustain $2,000 for an apartment. And that's low. In Denver, it's between $3,000 and $5,000 for a 1-bedroom. Now, that being said, I was resourceful. And I have to say thank you to Help and Hope Center specifically. It was First Press, New Hope Presbyterian, and Catholic Charities, and Help and Hope Center that helped us get a deposit back down. And thankfully, I was responsible enough to leave my apartment in really excellent condition. And they didn't even blink twice. They let us back in when I was able to get back in. It took a lot of work and resourcefulness, but here's the thing, is those who are on the street, first of all, they don't want to be in shelters. I'm an Uber driver, and I also have a private ride share for a lot of the folks that live in Castle Rock because Lyft and Uber is sometimes unavailable. And I'm really resourceful. But the thing is that a lot of the folks that are on the street don't have the mental capabilities to be resourceful. They have no education financially, they're addicted to drugs, and many of them are living under the radar. They don't want to be seen by our law enforcement. Okay, I've seen a lot of women get into my car, especially in Denver County, that have been raped. I've seen men who have been raped. I've actually taken in a young lady at the age of 16 who was abandoned. And now she is my adopted daughter. She's 22. I have gone to Phoenix, Arizona, which they have the most homeless youth that I know of who are actually soliciting their bodies. And I offered her a home and she said no. She finds more family on the street than she would in a group home. What we're missing isn't necessarily shelters. It's low-income housing. Because for 6 months, starting September of last year until March, April of this year, there is a 3-year wait on all of our low-income housing. And the bar has been lowered. You have to make a certain amount, and you can't make a certain amount over that. And that's for a family of 3. So that's really where we're lacking. And during lockdown, when my daughter, my senior who goes to Rock Canyon High School now, during lockdown, when the kids were at home schooling through the internet, she's an A/B student. She's always been an A student. She became an F student and her psychology waned. And I had no resources to find the right kind of mental health for her because we had Medicaid. Medicaid doesn't pay enough for our psychologists to get paid well. So there's very limited amounts of money that's allocated for mental health. So if you want to help people like my family, I'm doing really great right now. I now make $7,000 a month because I work for myself now. I figured it out. But if you really want to help people like me that end up in bad situations, whether it's by personal choice or not, we need low-income housing and we need better mental health programs.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Appreciate your comment. Any other public comment? Yes, Alderman Duzo.
Good morning. My name is Paul Narduzzo. I'm a resident of Castle Rock for the last 13 years, and I'm the director of the Catholic Charities Office here in Castle Rock. Hard to follow those comments by Susan. Mine is really a comment and a suggestion. I found the discussion this morning about the trespassing letter to be very informative, fact-based, great educational matter, related to this issue. That was all about private property, and it begs the question, what's the parallel track that law enforcement has for public property? And that may be a bigger discussion than merits a comment now. Perhaps a future agenda item might be my suggestion. So thank you.
Paul, thank you for that. And thank you for everything that Catholic Charities does. You're part of the fabric of this community. I don't know if law enforcement wants to speak to public property issues.
So I think really what the county attorney was talking about is really the challenge, right? So if someone's on public property, if they're doing something illegal, that's a different matter. But if it's just simply sleeping, we have this challenge of where do we take them, and that's the challenge with it. We certainly have rules about parks. Parks are closed at night. We obviously want to enforce those, but the case law has been pretty clear. You don't have a place to take them, you're at a little bit of risk if you're going to try to move people along out of a public space. And then there's also quasi-public spaces like a mall or a store where everybody's allowed to go, and as long as they're not being disruptive and they're not causing issues, and a property owner doesn't say, hey, we don't want that type of behavior here, I need you to leave, then there's challenges as well. So I guess my point about a quasi place is that if I walk into the mall, all of us go together to the mall, we all walk in the mall together, we're not going to get stopped, we're not going to get bothered, we're not going to get told to leave because we're not causing a problem. We don't smell different, we don't look different. But if a homeless person walks in right behind us, that person is going to get attention immediately, and that's a problem, and that's difficult. And then law enforcement gets put in the middle of all that because the business owner doesn't want that person on their property, and even though it's a public space where everybody can go. And so law enforcement often gets put in the middle of that, and when we get challenged, like, well, I don't want him here. Well, what is he doing that's any different than what the other people are doing? So that's our challenge, and I hope I'm articulating that well enough. But there's a lot of legal issues around that, and we try to navigate our way through that every day because we get put in the middle of this little struggle between property owners, business owners, and what they want to see on their property and what they don't want to see.
Well, and I think part of the conversation that we've had and what we've heard from citizens is we need to reclaim our public spaces. So where there is littering, there is crime, urination, defecation, a baby in a median, or a public safety issue. Those are areas where law enforcement has and can continue to engage. And I think with the help of this public awareness campaign and the phone number, people like Benjamin and others can call that and address issues even in public spaces. But thanks for that comment.
And Commissioner, I do want to point out that we have actually we've made a lot of movement with our parks and open space and different types of things. Just the simple things like locking the bathrooms at night so that they can't be used for shelter, putting their own signage up there saying that there's no camping allowed, or the park is closed after this time, which then the officers can point right at the sign and says, see, this park's closed, you have to leave. It's those type of things, and we've already put those into place, and it's starting to have a lot of effect.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Additional citizen comment? No online comment. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question, which was, how much does a sheriff's officer cost us per year?
And if you want to share your name and where you're from.
Sorry, Kelly Nixon. I live in the Meadows, and I'm a local business owner.
Okay, thank you. Law enforcement?
It depends on how long they've been with us. We run a 7-tier program from tier 1 to tier 7, but we'll use about a tier 5 deputy who's running about $75,000 a year, plus a vehicle and all their equipment and training.
So do you know what that total cost approximately would be per year?
I'd probably be wrong on this, but I'm guesstimating probably about $100,000 a year with benefits, costs of training and that type of stuff.
Okay, so I guess my concern would be that when we were going to spend the money on the pop-up shelters, I think we were spending 300,000 on those pop-up shelters. And then we're now currently spending 450,000 a year for 3 people to go out and assist the sheriff's department. That to me just seems like a discrepancy in what the yearly cost is per person. If we're spending 450,000 and they're only available between the hours of 7 to 5, but our sheriff's department, those people are available 24 hours a day, how many people in our community is the sheriff's department helping versus how many people is the heart helping? And that just seems disproportionate to me.
Yeah, well, I'm sure law enforcement can speak to this, but thank you for that comment. I mean, one of the real tangible benefits we've seen from co-responder teams is it does actually decrease expenses associated with emergency rooms, law enforcement, and the DA's budget. So in the mental health space, for example, even in our youth CRT, when you have a clinician paired with law enforcement, that ultimately and oftentimes does not result in somebody being booked into the jail. It's an engagement, a contact, and a referral to services, which saves everybody money. And we've seen that. I don't know, Chief Duffy, did you have more?
Well, just to kind of piggyback on that, the CRT co-response team program has proved to be a huge expense savings because on average, our officers or our CRT call officers are being called to anywhere between 9 and 10 CRT type mental health crisis calls a day. These are, if we didn't have those teams, then we'd have to take an officer who is supposed to be patrolling your neighborhood or responding to calls who wouldn't be available to do that. So that CRT officer and those teams have been able to take that burden off our normal patrol officers. Plus, we save the cost of the unnecessary emergency room visits on a possible mental one hold or the cost of incarcerating somebody in the county jail, which is a pretty significant cost. What we found with our HEART team is we're seeing that even twofold because our HEART team and our officers that are assisting the HEART team, they're not in the same car at times, they're separate. So the HEART team can be over here handling a call that if they weren't around, we would have to send a patrolman to. So we're actually saving and being more productive with the officers we have on our street by incorporating our HEART team.
And if I could clarify, so from a cost perspective, the actual cost of the actual individual is very similar. It's within a couple $1,000s. By the time you look at that actual salary, the costs, standing up a new program takes a little bit more. So there's initial investment. But if you heard Tiffany's story earlier, the amount of time it took Greg to help this 72-year-old lady who's living in her car access, find shelter, hotel vouchers, a place to stay while she's looking for a place to live, that was hours and hours and hours of work. And in our opinion, that is the responsibility of somebody who has been trained in some of that more social type of work. And it does not then require law enforcement to be away from addressing crime and safety in our community. And so there's a purpose for both, I guess would be my answer, right? We need the trained social worker that has the case management skills, the social skills, the resource skills to do the work of finding those resources. And we need law enforcement to help keep us safe and protected. And there are two distinct roles and they work well together. But the costs from a per person perspective are very, very, very similar.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate our sheriff's department and everything and want to make sure that we're not paying other people more money than what we're paying our sheriffs to protect us. So thank
Great.
you.
You bet. Thanks for being with us. Any other public comment? Okay, well, we're a little bit over time, but thank you so much to our citizens, all of our amazing experts in the group here today. Enjoy the rest of your day and we'll reconvene soon. Thanks so much.